The shotgun blast echoed through the cornfields like God's own thunder, but it wasn't aimed at me. It was the sound of my world cracking open. "Dad, I'm gay," Matthew said, his voice steady as the summer rain that followed. But his eyes, those wide, blue eyes I'd passed down from my own father, held a storm I couldn't outrun. I stood there in our cramped kitchen in small-town Iowa, the weight of my Purple Heart medal still heavy in the junk drawer upstairs, realizing that the war I'd survived in Vietnam had nothing on the one raging inside me now. I'd buried my secrets deeper than the bodies we left in the jungles. But here was my boy, 22 and fresh out of community college, laying his truth bare on the linoleum floor we'd scrubbed clean of every spill since he was knee-high. The clock on the wall ticked like a heartbeat, slow and unforgiving, as I gripped the edge of the Formica counter, my knuckles whitening against the faded yellow pattern that reminded me of Mom's old apron. "Say something, Dad," he pressed, his backpack slung over one shoulder like he was already halfway out the door to Chicago or San Francisco or anywhere that wasn't this suffocating grid of feedlots and fundamentalist churches. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that love was love, no matter the shape it took, but the words stuck like shrapnel in my throat. Instead, I muttered, "We'll talk later," and watched him walk out into the dusk, the screen door slapping shut behind him like a judge's gavel. That night, as the cicadas screamed their endless chorus outside my bedroom window, I pulled out the shoebox from under the bed, the one with the dog-eared letters from Nam, the faded Polaroids of boys who looked at me like I was their North Star. And there, tucked in the bottom, was the photo of Elias, his arms slung around my neck in a foxhole, both of us grinning like we'd stolen the moon. Elias, my Elias, the one I lost to a mortar round in '72, and the one I'd never mourned out loud because admitting it meant admitting everything. The next morning, the house felt hollow, like the wind had scooped out its guts. Sarah, my wife of 25 years, was at her shift at the diner, flipping eggs and dodging small talk about the latest baptisms at First Methodist. She'd always been the steady one, the anchor in our leaky boat of a marriage, but even she couldn't fill the voids I'd carved out long before we said, "I do." I drove the old Ford pickup to the VFW hall on the edge of town, the one with the peeling American flag out front and the bar that smelled like stale Budweiser and regret. It was my ritual on Tuesdays, coffee black as tar, a nod to the old-timers swapping stories about Tet Offensive and Agent Orange, pretending we weren't all ghosts haunting our own lives. But today, the stories grated. Old Harlan was going on about the gays ruining the military, his voice slurred from one too many nips before noon, and I felt it like a punch to the gut, the hypocrisy burning in my chest. I'd enlisted at 18, fresh-faced and full of that red, white, and blue fire they drilled into us at West High. Vietnam was supposed to be about freedom, about fighting the commies so we could all go home to apple pie and white picket fences. But in the mud and the monsoons, freedom looked different. It looked like Elias Ramirez, a scrawny kid from East LA with a laugh that cut through the rotor wash of the Hueys, and eyes that saw right through my bullshit bravado. We'd been assigned to the same platoon, humping it through the Central Highlands, where the triple canopy turned day to perpetual twilight. Elias was the radio man, always fiddling with the dials, pulling in faint echoes of Motown from some pirate station in Saigon. "Listen to this, Tony," he'd say, pressing the earpiece to my helmet, and we'd huddle close under the poncho, shoulders touching in the humid dark, pretending it was just to stay dry. But it wasn't. One night, after a firefight that left 3 of us bleeding out on the trail, we stumbled into a bombed-out village, the air thick with cordite and the sweet rot of frangipani. The stars were brutal that night, pinpricks in a black velvet sky, and Elias turned to me, his face smeared with camo paint, and said, "If we make it out, promise me we'll see the Grand Canyon together. You and me, no ghosts." I promised. God, how I promised. And in the shadows of that ruined hooch, with the distant thump of artillery shaking the earth, I kissed him. It was clumsy, desperate, tasting of sea rations and fear, but it was the first time I'd felt alive since stepping off the plane in Da Nang. For those stolen months, we were each other's secret compass. Whispers in the latrine, fingers brushing under the card table during poker nights, a shared cigarette in the pre-dawn chill that said more than any letter home could. Elias made me believe in something bigger than the body count, something worth fighting for beyond the politics and the protests back stateside. But war doesn't give a damn about promises. It was Ted again, that hellish 72 push, and we were pinned down in a rubber plantation, the VC closing in like shadows. Elias was on the horn, calling in chords for the gunships, his voice steady as rebar. "Tony, cover me," he yelled, and I did, laying down fire until my M16 jammed. The mortar came out of nowhere, a whistle, then the world exploding in white-hot shards. I dug him out with my bare hands, the dirt caking my nails, his blood warm on my fatigues. "Stay with me, Eli," I begged, but his eyes were already glazing over, that laugh gone silent forever. The medevac chopper lifted off without him, and I rode back to base with his dog tags clenched in my fist, the weight of them heavier than any rucksack. They shipped me home a month later, Purple Heart pinned to my chest like a scarlet letter. Sarah was waiting at the airport in Des Moines, her smile bright as the Iowa sun, and I married her 6 months after because that's what you did. You built the life they expected, the 2-story colonial on Elm Street, the job at the John Deere plant welding tractor frames, the kid who looked just like me but with her freckles. Matthew came along in a blur of midnight feedings and scraped knees, and I poured every ounce of love I had left into him, teaching him to bait a hook on Lake Okoboji, to throw a spiral under the floodlights at Friday night games. But Elias haunted the edges, in the way I'd lingered too long at the VFW, scanning faces for a ghost. In the nights, I'd wake sweating, reaching for a body that wasn't Sarah's. Now, with Matthew's words hanging in the air like smoke, those ghosts were rising. I sat at the Scarred Oak bar, nursing my coffee, when the door swung open and in walked Jack Harlan. No, not old Harlan's son, but Jack Riley, the history teacher from the high school who'd moved back to town after his divorce. Jack was one of those guys who looked like he'd stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Tall, with a mop of auburn hair going silver at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his green eyes, and a laugh that boomed like summer thunder. We'd crossed paths at town hall meetings, him advocating for the new LGBTQ plus resource center at the library, me nodding politely while my stomach twisted. "Tony? That you, buried in your mug like it's the last beer on earth." Jack slid onto the stool next to me, his flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms dusted with freckles. He smelled like old books and sandalwood soap, a far cry from the motor oil and manure that clung to most folks around here. "Just thinking," I grunted, but my voice came out rougher than intended. He tilted his head, that teacherly gaze peeling back layers I didn't want exposed. "About Matthew? Word travels fast in a town this size." Harlan was flapping his gums about it at the co-op this morning. His tone was light, but there was steel beneath it, the kind that said he wasn't one to suffer fools. I nodded, staring into the black swirl of my coffee. "Kid's got guts. More than I ever did." Jack paused, then laid a hand on my arm. Brief, warm, gone in a heartbeat, but enough to send a jolt through me like I'd touched a live wire. "Guts aren't inherited, Tony. They're earned. And from what I hear about Nam, you earned plenty." We talked then, halting at first, about nothing and everything. The Cubs' slim chance at the pennant, the way the river flooded every spring like clockwork. But as the afternoon wore on and the hall emptied out, the conversation turned, inevitable as the harvest moon. "You ever wonder," Jack said, swirling the dregs of his own coffee, "what it would have been like if we'd all just lived out loud back then? No hiding, no pretending." I thought of Elias, of the letters I'd burned in the backyard fire pit the year Matthew was born, ashes scattering like forbidden prayers. Every damn day, I admitted, the words slipping out before I could cage them. Jack's eyes met mine, and in that moment, the VFW hall faded. The flags, the memorabilia, the ghosts, and it was just us, two men on the edge of a confession, the air between us humming with possibility. By the time I got home, Sarah was in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour from the biscuits she'd been kneading like dough was the enemy. Matthew called from his aunts in Ames, she said without looking up, her voice tight as a banjo string. "Says he'll be back tomorrow. Wants to talk." I hung my keys on the hook by the door, the jangle loud in the silence. "You okay with this? With him?" She stopped, hands buried in the sticky mass, and fixed me with that blue-eyed stare that had always seen too much. I'm his mother, Tony. I love him, gay or not. But you've been somewhere else all day, like you're fighting a war all over again. I crossed the room, pulled her into a hug that felt more like apology than affection. She was soft against me, familiar as the creak of our bed springs, but as I held her, Elias's face flickered in my mind, overlaid with Jack's steady gaze. I'm sorry, I whispered, and meant it, for the half-life we'd built, for the truths I'd let fester like untreated wounds. That night, sleep evaded me again. I sat on the porch swing, the chains groaning under my weight, watching fireflies dance in the yard like lost souls. Matthew's truck pulled up just past midnight, headlights cutting through the dark like search beams. He climbed out, shoulders slumped, and collapsed beside me without a word. We sat there, two generations of quiet men, the swing's rhythm the only conversation. Dad, he finally said, voice cracking like dry earth. I didn't mean to drop it like that, but I can't keep pretending. At school, with the guys on the team, it was killing me. I reached over, squeezed his knee, the same way I'd done when he struck out in Little League, when his first girlfriend dumped him junior year. I know, son, more than you think. He turned, searching my face in the porch light's glow. What do you mean? The words hovered, heavy as humidity before a storm. Tell him, a voice urged, Elias's voice, Jack's, my own buried heart. But fear clamped down, the old enemy. What if he looked at me different? What if Sarah walked out? What if the town, with its whispers and side eyes, swallowed us whole? Just be you, Matt. That's all I ever wanted. He nodded, but doubt lingered in his eyes, a mirror of my own cowardice. As he headed inside, I pulled out my phone, an old flip model, but it worked, and scrolled to the number I'd saved last year after a veterans rally in Des Moines. Jack Riley. My thumb hovered over call, heart pounding like incoming fire. Freedom, Elias had said. The kind you fight for, not the kind they hand you. I hit dial. Jack's voice came through the line like a lifeline tossed into rough waters. Warm, a little sleepy, edged with that Midwestern drawl that made even hello sound like an invitation. Tony? Everything all right? It's after midnight. I leaned back against the porch rail, the wood cool and splintery under my palms, staring at the stars wheeling overhead like they had over that rubber plantation all those years ago. Couldn't sleep. Too much rattling around up here. I tapped my temple, the gesture absurd over the phone, but he chuckled anyway, low and understanding. Tell me about it. These old bones don't settle easy after a day of wrangling freshmen through the Boston Tea Party. There was a rustle, like he was shifting in bed, and I pictured it unbidden. His room in that converted Victorian on Maple, books stacked on the nightstand, a half-read biography of Whitman dog-eared on the floor. What's really on your mind, though? Matthew. Yeah. And other stuff. The pause stretched, taut as a tripwire. I'd called without a plan, just the ache of unspoken things propelling me forward. You ever feel like you've spent your whole life marching to someone else's drum? Like the man you got left behind in a war zone somewhere. The line went quiet, save for his breathing, steady as a metronome. When he spoke, it was soft, deliberate. Every single day, Tony. But that's the beautiful part. We get to pick up the beat whenever we're ready. No CO barking orders. We talked until the sky lightened to pearl gray, about nothing and the everything that mattered. His years teaching in Chicago, the sting of his ex-wife's accusations when she found his journal, my assembly line days at the plant, the way welding sparks mimicked the tracers over Hanoi. He didn't push, didn't pry, but by the time I hung up, promising coffee at the diner Saturday, something had shifted, a crack in the dam, water seeping through. Saturday dawned crisp, the kind of October morning where the leaves crunch underfoot like brittle promises. Sarah was at church early, volunteering for the bake sale, her goodbye kiss lingering on my cheek like a question mark. I drove to the diner in Town Square, past the courthouse with its Civil War cannon and the mural of cornstalks waving in eternal wind. Jack was already there, in a booth by the window, nursing a mug and flipping through the Des Moines Register. He looked up as the bell jingled, his smile unfolding slow and genuine, creasing the corners of his eyes. You clean up nice, he said as I slid in across from him, gesturing to my button-down. The one Sarah bought me for our anniversary, starched and blue as Lake Michigan. Figured I'd pretend I'm not a hayseed for once. The waitress, Doreen with her beehive and no-nonsense squint, poured my coffee without asking, eyeing us like we were plotting the next union strike. Small towns had long memories. Jack's advocacy for the library's Pride display last Pride Month hadn't sat well with everyone. We ordered pancakes stacked high with Iowa maple syrup, the kind that sticks to your ribs and your soul. Conversation flowed easy, him quoting Frost's The Road Not Taken, me countering with Springsteen's Born to Run, both of us laughing at how we'd both fled the heartland young, only to circle back like salmon to spawn. But under it all simmered the current, electric and unspoken. When our knees brushed under the table, neither of us pulled away. "Tell me about him," Jack said suddenly, forking a bite of pancake. "The one from Nam. I can see it in your eyes, Tony. That look like you've carried a torch through hell." I froze, syrup turning to ash in my mouth. How did he know? But then I remembered the VFW, my slip about living out loud. "Elias," I said, the name tasting like salt and smoke. And it poured out then. The foxholes, the whispers, the mortar that stole him. Jack listened without interruption, his hand finding mine across the table, thumb tracing slow circles on my knuckles. It was the first touch in decades that didn't feel like obligation, and it undid me, tears pricking hot behind my eyes. "He'd be proud of you," Jack murmured when I finished, voice thick. "For surviving. For being here now." We lingered until Doreen cleared her throat pointedly, the diner emptying to the after-church rush. Outside, the air was laced with wood smoke from someone's chimney, and as we stood by my truck, Jack stepped closer, his breath mingling with mine. "Come to the rally next weekend," he said, not quite a question. "The one for the resource center. Bring Matthew. Show him what fighting for freedom looks like stateside." I nodded, throat tight, and watched him walk to his Subaru, that easy stride belying the weight he carried too. Driving home, the radio crooned an old Eagles tune, "Take It Easy," and for the first time in years, I believed I could. Matthew returned Sunday evening, his duffel thumping on the stairs like a declaration. Dinner was pot roast, Sarah's specialty, the table set with the good china we'd gotten as a wedding gift. Tension hummed like a live wire, but we ate in fits and starts, passing the peas and dodging the elephant. "So," Sarah ventured finally, wiping her mouth with a napkin, "tell us about Ames. Your aunt spoil you rotten." Matthew shrugged, pushing potatoes around his plate. "It was fine, but I missed home. Missed you guys." His eyes flicked to me, expectant, wounded. I set down my fork, the clink loud in the hush. "Son, what you said the other day. It took guts. More than storming a beach or calling in fire on your own position." I swallowed, the words gathering like storm clouds. And it made me think about my own stuff. Things I've kept locked up tighter than a POW camp. Sarah's hand stilled on her water glass, her face paling. Matthew leaned forward, brows knit. "What do you mean, Dad?" The dam cracked wider. "In Nam, there was a guy, Elias. We loved each other. Not like buddies. Like men do." The confession hung there, raw and ragged, the kitchen clock ticking judgment. Sarah's eyes widened, then softened with something like recognition. Had she suspected all along? Matthew's mouth parted in shock, then curved into a tentative smile, the first real one since his bombshell. "Dad, that's... wow." He reached across, gripped my arm. "Why didn't you ever say?" "Fear, mostly. The times. The town. Your mom deserved better than a half-man." I glanced at Sarah, bracing for the fallout. But she surprised me, sliding her chair back with a scrape. "Anthony Hayes, if you think I've spent a quarter-century with a ghost, you're dumber than you look." Her voice wobbled, but her chin lifted. I knew. Not the details, but enough. The way you'd stare off during 4th of July parades, or clutch that shoebox like it was Holy Writ. I stayed because I love you, the whole mess of you. But hiding? That's no life. Tears tracked down her cheeks, and mine joined them, a flood long overdue. Matthew pulled us both into a hug, awkward and fierce, the three of us clinging like shipwreck survivors. For the first time, the house felt full, not of secrets, but of us. The week blurred into harvest frenzy, combines rumbling through the fields, the air gold with chaff. I threw myself into work at the plant, but my mind wandered to Jack, to the rally, to the man I'd glimpsed in the mirror that morning, eyes clearer, shoulders less bowed. Matthew started volunteering at the library with Jack's group, coming home buzzing about zine drives and story hours for queer kids. "You should come, Dad," he'd say, and I'd nod, the pull strengthening. Friday night, Sarah cornered me in the garage, amid the clutter of fishing rods and oil cans. "Go to that rally tomorrow," she said, arms crossed. "For him. For you. We've tiptoed around this long enough." I searched her face, saw the resolve etched there, the same that had carried her through my black dog days post-war, through miscarriages and mill layoffs. "What about us? This changes everything." She stepped close, cupped my face in flour-dusted hands. "It changes the lie, Tony, not the love. And maybe it's time for a new chapter. For all of us." I kissed her then, grateful and grieving for the years we'd patched together with good intentions. As she headed inside, I pulled out the old army jacket from the trunk, faded OD green, Elias's initials scratched into the cuff, and slipped it on. It fit different now, looser, like the man inside had finally grown into his skin. The rally was held in the park by the river, under a sky bruised with thunderheads. Banners fluttered, love wins in the heartland, rainbow flags snapping in the breeze alongside Old Glory. A couple hundred folks milled about, farmers in Carhartts, teachers with clipboards, a cluster of teens painting signs with glitter glue. Jack spotted me from the stage, where he was emceeing, and his face lit up like dawn breaking. "Tony Hayes, everyone," he boomed into the mic as I approached, pulling me up beside him. The crowd clapped, a wave of sound that washed over me warm and strange. Matthew was in the front row, grinning like I'd just hit a walk-off homer. Jack handed me the mic, his hand lingering on mine. "Tell him why you're here." I cleared my throat, the words tumbling out unpolished but true. "Fought in Vietnam for freedom I couldn't claim back home. Buried my heart with a brother in arms. But my son, he showed me it's never too late to stand up, to live." The applause swelled, mingled with whoops and a few sniffles. As I stepped down, Jack caught my elbow, drew me aside behind the speakers. "Proud of you," he murmured, close enough that his cologne wrapped around me like a promise. Then the sky split, rain sheeting down in biblical fury. The crowd scattered, laughing and cursing, but Jack grabbed my hand, tugging me under the pavilion by the bandstand. Soaked to the skin, we stood there panting, the world blurring to gray and green. "You came," he said, voice hushed over the downpour. Couldn't not. And then, because the rain drowned out reason, I leaned in, our lips meeting soft and searching, tentative at first, then deepening with the hunger of deferred dreams. His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing away rivulets, and in that kiss, I tasted redemption, coffee and rain and the faint tang of freedom. We broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together, the storm raging on. "Elias would like you," I whispered. Jack smiled, eyes shining. "Then let's make him proud." But peace, like ceasefire in the bush, never lasts. Monday brought the backlash, insidious as Agent Orange creeping through the veins. It started small, a hang-up call at dawn, the phone's trill yanking me from dreams of Jack's hands on my waist. Then the whispers at the plant, guys I'd shared smokes with for decades averting their eyes, muttering about that rally stunt over the welder's hiss. By lunch, Foreman Greeley pulled me aside in the break room, his face red as the safety placards on the walls. "Tony, level with me. What's this about you and that Riley fella? Folks are talking, saying you're, you know." He trailed off, shifting like his boots pinched, the coffee stain on his tie suddenly fascinating. I set down my sandwich, the bread turning to cardboard in my mouth. "I'm gay, if that's what you're dancing around. Been that way since before you," and I shipped out to basic. The words landed flat, matter of fact, but inside, my pulse thrummed like rotors overhead. Greeley's jaw worked, chewing on implications. "Look, you're the best welder we've got. But HR, complaints. You see the bind." He clapped my shoulder, awkward and avuncular, then shuffled off, leaving me with the hum of the vending machine and a cold knot in my gut. Home wasn't sanctuary either. Sarah fielded glares at the diner, old ladies who'd cooed over her pies now sniffing about influence on the young ones. Matthew's phone blew up with texts from high school buddies, half supportive, half venomous, one even slinging slurs that made my fists clench. "They're just scared." He insisted over meatloaf that night, but his bravado cracked. I shadowed with the weight of being the town's first-out kid. And me? I replayed the kiss with Jack 100 times, the thrill soured by dread. We'd met again Tuesday at the river trail, walking the towpath where the willows dipped low, their branches trailing like fingers in the current. "This is what it costs," I'd said, kicking a pebble into the water, watching ripples spread. The looks, the lost friends. Jack stopped, turned me to face him, his grip firm on my elbows. "Freedom always does, Tony. Remember D-Day? The beaches ran red before the flags went up. But we don't stop because it's hard. We stop if we let it break us." His words echoed Elias, that unyielding belief in tomorrow, and I kissed him again, fierce under the sycamores, hands fisting in his shirt. It was a reclaiming, a vow against the creeping dark. But as we parted, sweat-slick and breathless, a truck rumbled past on the access road, slow, deliberate, and I caught the glint of binoculars from the cab. Harlan's boy, no doubt, feeding the gossip mill. Wednesday shattered it all. I came home to find Sarah on the living room couch, a letter trembling in her hands, her face ashen as a winter field. "Tony," she whispered, holding it out like it burned. The envelope was postmarked from town, no return address, the handwriting blocky and anonymous. I snatched it, unfolding the single sheet with a dread heavier than flak jackets. "Dear Mrs. Hayes," it read, typed in courier font for that extra gut-punch anonymity. "We thought you'd want to know what your husband's really up to. Pictures attached. Wouldn't want the church ladies getting wind, or your precious boy influenced further. Consider this a friendly warning. Signed, Concerned Neighbors." The photos tumbled out like accusations, grainy shots from the river, Jack and me locked in that kiss, his hand on my neck, my body arched into his. Blown up, damning, the willows framing us like a lurid postcard. My knees buckled, and I sank beside her, the paper crumpling in my fist. "Who?" I rasped, rage boiling up hot and blind. Sarah shook her head, tears carving tracks through her makeup. "Doesn't matter." "What does, Tony, what we do now?" Her voice broke, raw with betrayal not of me, but of the life we'd armored ourselves in. "I stood by you through the nightmares, the drinking. But this, it's poison. For Matthew. For us." The front door banged open then, Matthew bursting in with his backpack and a grin that died at the sight of us. "What's wrong, Mom? Dad?" She handed him the letter, her hands steady now, and he scanned it, face cycling through confusion to fury. "This is bullshit. Who sent this? I'll find him." "No." I cut in, standing, the photos scattering like shrapnel across the rug. "You won't. This town's always been a powder keg. We knew lighting the fuse might blow back." "But Dad," his eyes, so like Elias's in their fire, pleaded. I pulled him close, hugged him hard enough to bruise. "Go to your room, son. Let me handle this." He resisted a beat, then nodded, trudging upstairs with the slump of defeat. Sarah and I sat in the wreckage, the silence thicker than fog over the Mississippi. "I never wanted this for you," I said finally, voice hoarse. "The hiding, the hurt." She reached for my hand, laced our fingers, the simple gold band glinting like a truce flag. "I know, but maybe it's time to stop hiding. Divorce, if that's what it takes. Co-parent Matthew. You deserve your truth, Tony. We all do." The word hung there. Divorce, like a grenade pin pulled. I'd always seen it as failure, the ultimate surrender. But in her eyes, steady as prairie grass and wind, I saw grace. "You do that? For me?" "For us," she corrected, squeezing. "The family we build now, not the one we faked." We cried then, ugly and unashamed, mourning the illusion while cradling the real. Upstairs, Matthew blasted Springsteen, Thunder Road, the lyrics bleeding through the floorboards like a battle cry. Thursday, I drove to the VFW at dawn, the hall empty save for the janitor mopping up last night's spills. I cornered Greeley by the cooler, the air chill with last call's ghosts. "I'm not quitting," I told him, voice level as a rifle sight. "But if the plant can't handle who I am, then it's their loss." He blinked, caught off guard, then nodded slow. "Fair enough, Hayes. Just keep your head down." I didn't. Friday, I met Jack at his place, the Victorian with its gingerbread trim and creaky porch swing. He took one look at my face and pulled me inside, into the kitchen where coffee brewed strong and scones cooled on a rack. The letter, he guessed, reading me like an open book. Yeah. I handed him the photos, watching his jaw tighten. Harlan's crew, probably. Stirring the pot. He set them down, deliberate, then crossed to me, hands on my shoulders. This is why we fight, Tony. Not for parades or medals. For moments like this, where we choose love over fear. I searched his face, that map of laugh lines and resolve, and felt the pull, magnetic, inexorable. And if it costs everything, job, home, family, then we rebuild. Together. His kiss was anchor and sail, grounding me even as it launched me into unknown waters. We spent the day there, talking strategy, lawyers for the divorce, support groups for Matthew, a plan to expose the poison pen cowards without sinking to their level. By evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the walls amber, Jack led me to the backyard, a postage stamp oasis of raised beds and a fire pit ringed with Adirondack chairs. Elias's stars, he said, nodding to the clearing sky. Tell me more. So I did, sprawled on the grass with him beside me, our heads close on a shared blanket. Stories of Elias's jokes during patrols, his habit of carving hearts into bamboo with his K-bar, the way he'd hum, "Ain't no mountain high enough," to drown out the mortars. Jack shared too, his first crush on a college roommate, the terror of coming out to his parents in '95, the divorce that freed him but left scars like stretch marks. As night deepened, fireflies winked like signal flares, and Jack's hand found mine, lacing fingers in the dark. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered, and I believed him, the weight lifting like a rucksack shed after a long hump. But Saturday brought the ambush. The rally's afterglow had drawn counter-protesters, a dozen picketers from the Baptist fringe, signs screaming Sodom and Gomorrah, outside the library. Matthew and I arrived to support Jack's cleanup crew, but as we parked, a rock shattered the windshield of Jack's Subaru, parked curbside. Glass spiderwebbed, and then the shouts. Perverts. Groomers. I shoved Matthew behind me, heart slamming, scanning faces. There, Harlan's son, egging on the ringleader, a burly preacher I'd bought feed from at the co-op. "Get inside." I barked to Matt, but he stood firm, fists balled. "Dad, we can't run." The crowd surged, a bottle sailing toward us, aimed at Matthew. I lunged, taking the hit on my shoulder, the shatter exploding pain down my arm. Sirens wailed distant, but close enough to scatter them, tails tucked like whipped dogs. Jack burst from the library, face ashen, wrapping me in a coat against the chill. "Jesus, Tony. Hospital." "Nah, just a bruise." But as medics checked me over, Matthew's eyes blazed with something new, not fear, but fire. "This ends now," he vowed, and I saw Elias in him unbowed. That night, over takeout pizza in Jack's kitchen, Sarah joining us, her presence a quiet alliance. We plotted the counterstrike. Not fists, but truth. A town hall, open mic, stories from the heart. "Show 'em we're neighbors, not enemies," Jack said, and we nodded, a fragile coalition forged in pizza, grease, and resolve. Sunday service at First Methodist was electric with undercurrents, whispers behind hymnals, eyes darting like minnows. Pastor Ellis preached on forgiveness, his voice booming off the rafters, but midway, he faltered, glancing at the back pew where Sarah and I sat, Matthew between us like a shield. After, in the fellowship hall over weak coffee and lemon bars, the confrontations came. Old Mrs. Whitaker, who'd knitted Matthew's baby blanket, cornered Sarah. "Pray for him, dear. And your husband." That rally was unseemly. Sarah's smile was steel. "We're praying, Marge. For understanding. For love." Harlan himself lumbered up, gut straining his polyester suit, face flushed from the pulpit wine. "Tony, a word." He jerked his head toward the vestibule, and I followed, the stained glass saints watching like silent judges. "You've stirred a hornet's nest," he growled, breath sour as sauerkraut. "That letter? Not me, but I get it. Folks are scared, for the kids, the values." "Scared of what, Harlan?" Two guys holding hands. "My son loving who he loves." My voice rose, echoing off the stone. He bristled, jowls quivering. "It's unnatural, Against God. You fought for America, not this agenda. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in his piggy eyes, the same fear that had kept me silent for decades. I fought for freedom, you son of a bitch. For the right to live without your boot on my neck. And if that's an agenda, sign me up. He recoiled, sputtering, and I walked out, chest heaving, into the sunlight that felt brighter, fiercer. Sarah waited by the Impala, Matthew beside her, and as we drove away, the rear view shrank the church to a speck, a relic, not a ruler. That afternoon, I called a lawyer in Des Moines, started the papers for the divorce. Amicable, focused on Matthew's future. Sarah signed without hesitation, her hug fierce. New beginnings, she said, and meant it. Evening found me at the river again, alone this time, skipping stones into the current. Jack joined me unannounced, 2 Laneys in hand, the bottles sweating in the heat. Heard about church, he said, clinking mine. Brave. Necessary. We sat on the bank, feet dangling, the water gurgling secrets. Sarah and I, it's over. Officially. He nodded. No surprise, just quiet support. And you? What's next for Anthony Hayes? I turned, met his gaze, green as new leaves, steady as home. You, if you'll have me. His smile bloomed, and he kissed me there, slow and sweet, the river bearing witness. In that moment, with the sun gilding the waves, I felt Elias's approval, a whisper on the wind. Live, Tony. Live. The town hall was a powder keg primed, the high school gym packed shoulder to shoulder under fluorescent buzz. Folding chairs scraped on the waxed floor, the air thick with coffee breath and anticipation. Mayor Wilkins, a rotund relic with a comb-over that defied gravity, banged his gavel like it owed him money. Order. This ain't a circus, it's democracy. Jack and I sat front row, Matthew to my left, Sarah to his, our patchwork family on display. The agenda was simple, the resource center's funding, but everyone knew it was proxy for the real war, hearts and minds in flyover country. Speakers lined up, librarians touting literacy stats, a therapist from Ames on mental health for queer youth, a farmer's wife who'd lost her son to suicide after church shaming. Then Harlan took the mic, his bulk dwarfing the podium, face mottled as overripe tomato. This so-called center? It's indoctrination, turning our boys into abominations. I seen it. Tony Hayes up there last week, preaching his perversion. We built this town on God and grit, not that. Murmurs rippled, heads swiveling my way, some nods, some scowls. My pulse jackhammered, but Jack's knee pressed mine under the table, grounding. When my turn came, I rose slow, the gym's eyes pinning me like tracers. Harlan's right about one thing. I started, voice carrying clear to the bleachers. This town was built on grit. Mine got tested in Vietnam. Foxholes where love was the only thing keeping you sane. Elias Ramirez, my radio man, saved my hide more times than I can count. And yeah, we loved each other. Deep. True. The kind that makes you fight harder, live braver. Gasps, a few hisses, but I pressed on, the words flowing like a breached levee. I came home, buried it under a wife I cherish and a son I'm proud of. But Matthew, my boy, he came out, and it cracked me open. Showed me hiding ain't living. It's dying slow. I glanced at Matt, his chin lifted, eyes fierce. This center? It's not agenda. It's lifeline. For kids like him, like the ones Harlan's so scared of. I fought for their freedom overseas. Now I'm fighting for it here, on home soil. Applause erupted, scattered at first, then swelling, drowning the jeers. A woman in the back stood, then another, until half the gym was on its feet. Harlan slumped in his chair, deflated, his concerned neighbors shrinking into the woodwork. After, in the parking lot under sodium lamps, folks approached, tentative handshakes, a gruff, semper fi from a vet-eyed nodded to at the PO, tears from the therapist who'd hugged Matthew earlier. Even Greeley clapped my back, muttering, "Plant's fine with you, Hayes. Keep welding straight." Jack pulled me aside by the flagpole, his embrace fierce amid the dispersing crowd. "You were magnificent," he breathed, lips brushing my temple. We were, because it was us now, him and me, building something solid from the rubble. The weeks unspooled like a well-tied fly line. Divorce papers finalized clean, Sarah moving to a bungalow 2 blocks over. Close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough for her pottery classes, and that cruise she'd always dreamed of. Matthew thrived, heading to Iowa in the fall on a partial ride, interning at the resource center with dreams of poli-sci and activism. Gonna change the world, Dad, he'd say, and I'd believe him, seeing Elias's fire in his stride. For Jack and me, it was slower burn, dates at the diner, Doreen thawing with extra bacon, weekends hiking the bluffs at Makokata Caves, where the echoes carried our laughter like secrets shared. One evening in November, frost silvering the fields, he drove me to the Grand Canyon, or as close as Iowa gets, the overlook at effigy mounds, ancient earthworks rising like silent sentinels. We stood at the rail, wind whipping our scarves, the Mississippi snaking below like a vein of mercury. Elias's promise, I said, pulling the faded Polaroid from my wallet. Me and him, foxhole grins. Jack nodded, arm around my waist. Think he'd approve? More than. He'd say we're proof the war's won. I turned, kissed him deep, the river rumbling approval below. But scars linger, like ghosts in the mist. Christmas brought Harlan's reckoning, not vengeance, but vulnerability. He showed up on my doorstep New Year's Eve, hat in hand, eyes downcast as a whipped hound. Tony, about the letter. Wasn't me direct, but I egged him on. Regret it now. My boy's struggling, thinks he's, like you, didn't know how to handle. I stepped aside, waved him in. We sat at the kitchen table, once Sarah's domain, now mine with its bachelor clutter of takeout boxes and tool magazines. Jack brewed coffee, silent witness, as Harlan unspooled. His own buried doubts, a college fling in the 60s swept under prayer rugs, the fear that had turned to fury. Forgive a fool, he asked, voice cracking. Not forgiveness, I said, sliding him a mug. Understanding. Join us at the center sometime. See for yourself. He nodded, left with a handshake that lingered, a bridge, rickety but real. Spring thawed the ground and the grudges. The resource center opened in April, ribbon cutting with Mayor Wilkins beaming beside rainbow bunting. Matthew emceed, cracking jokes that eased the crowd. Sarah donated the quilts she'd pieced from old fatigues. Jack and I stood off stage, hands linked, his thumb tracing my knuckles, a habit now, comforting as sunrise. That night, under a blanket of stars on Jack's dock, that Midwestern lake mirroring the Milky Way, we made love for the first time. Not frantic, but reverent, hands mapping scars and stories, breath sinking like well-oiled gears. Afterward, tangled in sheets scented with pine and him, I whispered, "This is what freedom feels like." He smiled in the dark, pulling me closer. Damn right. Years folded like bellows. Matthew graduated, landed a job with a queer rights org in D.C., visiting with boyfriends who became family. Sarah remarried, a gentle widower from the garden club, her laugh brighter now. Jack and I bought a fixer-upper on the river, turning the garage into a workshop where I welded sculptures, abstract hearts from rebar, sold at craft fairs to fund the center. Harlan came around, tentative at first, bringing his son to group nights. The boy bloomed, came out junior year, and Harlan cried at the Pride picnic, hugging me fierce. You saved us, Tony. Nah, we saved each other. Elias visited in dreams less, his face peaceful now, a benediction. On the anniversary of Tet, I'd hike to the mounds alone, toast him with a flask of bourbon, thank him for the push. Lived it, Eli. For both of us. And on quiet evenings, Jack and I'd swing on the porch, fireflies dancing, the world vast and kind. I'd fought for freedom in war, buried my truth in peace. But love, fierce and unyielding, unearthed it. In the heartland's stubborn soil, we'd planted something enduring, not just survival, but joy. The kind that outlasts bullets and bigotry, blooming wild and free.